Hello and welcome to part 4. Now, those who are eagle-eyed will notice that during the part 3, I didn't talk much about motherboard by capability or necessity when evaluating the aircraft. Well, there's a reason for that, and it filters into the post-World War II discussion, which is why I left it a bit. So, World War II can, of course, be said to be a necessity. There is so much little infrastructure and there is need for as many aircraft as possible. But also it can be said to be capability because the capabilities of the aircraft, and especially flying boats, seaplanes, means you can move a lot of equipment to a lot of places which didn't have infrastructure. And they're also very flexible when it comes to doing maritime patrols. And if your aircraft runs out of fuel, and it can land near an allied ship, well, it can land in the middle of the sea and can possibly be refueled. In fact, there are stories of them landing and another one coming out, landing nearby with extra fuel, giving them passing the fuel over and them getting away. So, basically, there's a lot which goes on in World War II, which makes them useful. Which makes what happens post-World War II even stranger. And I mean really, really strange. These aircraft have been essential, critical, so useful. Why, suddenly then, post-World War II, does this happen? But before we get there, bilge pumps! Way, bilge pumps. Go on, please click on the link. Go see what me, Draken Fennell, and Jamie from Armour Carriers have been speaking about this week. I promise you, you will be amused. But I also promise you that you will probably, hopefully, be informed. Enjoy. It's a lot of fun. So, what endures? Well, they don't necessarily jump out as quickly as we think. There is the giant Martin Mars, which I'm just going to leave there because that's just colossal. And it's so cool. It is. It's a very, very cool aircraft. And the Grumman Albatross. Now, the Martin Mars, if I just get my notes up, is mainly remembered nowadays as a water bomber, but was actually built as a 4-engined cargo transport flying boat for the United States Navy during World War II. It is the largest of the Allied flying boats. It's massive, and therefore we have to compare it to the BV-222 and the BV-238. And that is where it really does come into its own, because its maximum takeoff weight is nearly 75 tons. So, actually, a little bit lower than them. It itself, though, only weighs 41 tons at gross weight and 34.25 tons at empty. So that's a lot of tonnage for carrying capacity. A lot of tonnage for carrying capacity. And you don't have to consider sort of their range. It's 4,300 nautical miles. That's a very long way. It's an incredibly long way. Capacity, 133 troops, 84 litter patients with 25 attendants, or a 15-ton payload, including up to 7 Willis Jeeps, apparently, according to my notes, which I got from a very interesting source. And I actually found had been the same source had been quoted on Wikipedia, so I'm going to go with that one being correct. Jane's fighting aircraft of World War II. You can't see it at the moment, but it's in there. They are a very, very cool thing, and they are colossal. But they're not as long served in military life as the albatrosses. And the albatross is really quite cool because it can be used as a small ferry aircraft, as a search and rescue aircraft, but it can also be used for, inserting things. So it can be, it's quite efficient enough that you can use it on land on sort of normal airfields as being able to use it at sea. It has a very cool system of lifting up its wheels. So the undercarriage comes up and goes. It's quite cool. And it was operated by Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Republic of China, Germany, Greece, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, Norway, Pakistan, Peru, Philippines, Spain, Thailand, and the United States. The only ones who didn't operate it were the UK, who probably had ours of their own, and Sunderland still running around until they decided to use helicopters. And that really is the thing. You start to realise the reason that they disappear so much is because of helicopters. Their advantage is that they can land on water and take off anywhere and do all sorts of amazing things. That's great. Helicopters can do that and can land in a lot less space. So helicopters sort of take the role. But, the Granum Albatross has a range of 2,480 nautical miles. Which is just... It's cute, sort of thing. It can carry 10 passengers. So it's not massive, but if you're inserting small teams... And this is the thing, when you're thinking about it, the Granum Albatross makes a lot of sense for a force which is doing small unit operations. Because it can land on a patch of water, and it can insert a small number of people with their equipment, pick them up and get them away. It's a very useful system for all sorts of things. Japan. Japan showed faith. Japan did show a lot of faith. They kept, and they still do keep, with the seaplanes because it makes sense for their part of the world, but also it makes sense in terms of their infrastructure. When you're dealing with a land which can be crippled by earthquakes, which can have all sorts of issues, well, water may have a lot of problems, but it tends to stay there. So you might have a tidal wave go across, which is not nice. You might have earthquakes cause all sorts of issues, all sorts of problems. But the water will still be there, and you can land on it. The runway could be split, could all sorts of issues. So actually having them around makes sense. And they could be used for anti-submarine warfare, they could be used for all sorts of things, and they were. And especially the Shinmei US 1A, excuse me, it could carry, its performance was, going down my notes again, it had a range of 2,000 nautical miles, roughly, with a few more over that. And it can carry, again, so much. They can be used for so many things. But it can capacity of 20 seated survivors or 12 stretchers. It can also take a very hefty weapons load if it wanted to. So these things are very useful ships. Maybe the story of me coming on. Very useful aircraft. Although I do love the fact that their takeoff distance on water is 555 meters, or a little over 1,800 feet. It's roughly 600 and something yards. Because 1,821 feet, which is 607 yards, I think. Anyway, landing distance is 220 meters. Ooh. That's not that long. That really isn't that long. And they are very useful for their search and rescue, for the islands they have to deal with, for all the things they've got going around, which is why they are replaced by the Shinmei US-2, which is still in production at the moment. I think they're planning on building 8, but I'm up to 8, but in the nicest way. I wouldn't be surprised if other nations start to buy them. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Japanese build more, especially with what's going on in their islands at the moment with the Chinese. Because these, again, become a very useful system for doing a rapid reinforcement and a rapid landing. They can do search and rescue, but they can also do rapid insertion of personnel. For example, they can again carry 20 passengers or 12 stretchers. They have a range of 2,500 nautical miles. They have a takeoff distance on the ground of 490 meters, a takeoff distance on water of 280 meters, a landing distance on water of 330 meters. So they are very quick to take off and very quick to land in comparison to others. And they are lovely, great big aircraft. I have a lot of respect for the US-2s. I'd love to go for a flight in one someday. I have a feeling they are a very good, very solid aircraft, and I wouldn't be surprised if you start, especially with the way the world's going, with actually people starting to buy a few more. China, the very dirty word if you're on bilge pumps. Now, there is the Harbin SH-5 1986-2 still on the service, which is still going, and is, broadly speaking, anti-submarine warfare and search and rescue again. I'm not sure I believe any of the figures I read about it. Some figures look dramatically over the top. Some look roughly about right. We'll see what you think. But I'm going to go with the most publicly available figures. So, the most publicly available figures that I can verify as much as I can is an endurance of 15 hours when just using 2 engines, and a range of 2,568 nautical miles with maximum fuel. Which puts them in the sort of range of the Shinmei USA 1A sort of thing, and the Shinmei US 2. They're equivalents, okay? I have a feeling I wouldn't be surprised if these are replaced soon, because, and this is why I also have the AVIC AG600, which is their new hotness, which apparently has a range which is shorter, according to publications, than the older one with 2,400 nautical miles and endurance of 12 hours. I am, again, not quite sure about these things. I have a feeling these are being procured, especially the new ones, with the idea of their island network. And if you want to keep the islands supplied, especially the ones they're building, South China Sea, and the ones they're looking at acquiring in the East China Sea, then these sort of systems make sense as an ability to move your things around, to move a lot of things around at long range relatively quickly. Apparently you can move 50 rescue people in the AG600, or a whole load of water. But again, I would take those figures with a pinch of salt. I wouldn't be surprised if you can move a good sized number of troops aboard if you need to. 50 is quite good, but I think they could probably take more. Looking at the pictures and the dimensions and doing a rough work in my head. If they can't, they have used some very heavy metal work, which means they're preparing for very rough landings. It's always an option. But again, the interesting thing is we're currently looking at, everyone's apparently looking at a pivot east to the Pacific. Well, if you're fighting in the Pacific, especially in the maritime littoral zone, and you want to rapidly move troops and personnel forward, then seaplanes become very, very attractive. In fact, they become something which is definitely more of a necessity than as a capability, than just a capability you'd like. Because if you're using a seaplane, it can be quite a large aircraft. In fact, as you've seen, a very large aircraft, and can carry a lot of stuff. If you consider if you were building a modern version of the Martin Mars, how much could it be built to carry? What kind of engines would it be using? What would its range be? How useful would it to be able to for an aircraft to be able to drop out of the sky where it needs to, land a reinforced platoon, company strength of Marines or paratroopers with their equipment, and then disappear off, and no trace. There's no marks on the sand, there's nothing. It just landed in the water, got them off, and gone. Now, you're going to tell me that there's global satellite coverage constantly. But again, if we consider some of the other systems which are being around the world, blinding, obscuring, confusing satellites for a short amount of time is quite viable. And it can create a whole load of uncertainty, and you can move these people in. And who knows where they are. And they do it at night. Camouflage. And yes, we can do the same from helicopters and submarines, but that's far shorter range. And I have my sneaking suspicion is that is certainly what China is thinking about. The question is, though, will anyone else be thinking about how to do it themselves other than China? Japan, maybe? Right then. The Americans, though, are not completely out of the race. I found this by Privateer Industries Privateer. It's a kit-built aircraft, apparently, but they are now selling them. It has gone back to the pusher propeller system. But it looks kind of cute to me. It can take barely anyone, so it would definitely be special forces if you were going to use it for military applications. But the thing is, it doesn't mean the Americans are completely out or anyone in the West is completely out. There are other seaplanes being looked at and float planes. I just think the current policies are all focused on producing the best rather than necessarily thinking, what can we do in the worst case scenario? So, today is Thursday night of July, and it's Flying Boats and Seaplanes. There's going to be a live on later, which will be connected with these, which I hope you'll enjoy. And we'll go through these slides again, and some more slides will be added in to talk about them, answer questions, and see what you think. There'll be some more admirals, engineers, and historians on the 14th of July, so expect, for those wondering, and tidbit, Gorshkov will be coming up. And Sun Tzu, maybe. Or maybe Admiral Z, Zheng He. There's so many options. Anyway, naval diplomacy. The Patron video. Now that's what I'm looking forward to, I admit. Indian Ocean, 1941 to 43. What did it get up there, and what could have got up there? Interesting one. From the Sea, making Mare Nostrum a hollow jest. Well, for that one, my new books arrived. Yay! Sorry. I've had a lot of fun with recording today because books have kept arriving. The first couple of versions of this one were interrupted by this arriving, and then this arrived, and it's proof in the joy of the world that it is rather insane because they were all ordered from Amazon and they all arrived separately. Just slightly nutty, but fun. And it's Twitter at AC_Naval History. Patreon, AC Naval History, and Global Maritime History. There is a theme going on there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed those. I hope you liked Discord down below. And this is very close to the 20-minute mark, so it is the quickest one by far. But there's been a couple of roughly 30 minutes, and one 40-minute and one 20-minute in these sort of introductions. So hopefully they're interesting to you, and hope you've enjoyed them. And hopefully you join me for the live later. Take care.